Could ancient survival secrets actually save your life? When John Harrison found himself stranded in the wilderness after a flash flood took everything, his gear, his phone, his supplies, it wasn't his expensive survival gear that saved him. It was knowledge passed down through generations of indigenous tribes. Today, we're uncovering the most powerful tribal techniques that helped people survive against all odds, techniques you might need sooner than you think. Welcome back to the channel, survival enthusiasts. I'm Ancient Survivor, and today we're diving deep into tribal survival skills that have sustained humanity for thousands of years before modern technology existed. These aren't just historical curiosities. These ancient survival techniques represent the culmination of human ingenuity, passed down through generations and refined through countless life or death situations. The Yanomami tribe of the Amazon, for example, can identify over 500 plant species and their uses, knowledge that took centuries to develop. What makes these primitive survival skills so valuable today? In our world of smartphones and GPS, we've lost touch with the fundamental knowledge that kept our ancestors alive. But here's the thing, technology can fail, batteries die, signals get lost, and when disaster strikes, these tribal survival techniques could be the difference between life and death. Think about it. Indigenous peoples thrived in some of Earth's harshest environments. Without any modern tools, the bushcraft techniques they developed weren't just effective, they were elegant in their simplicity and perfect adaptation to their environments. In the next 20 minutes, I'll show you the most critical wilderness survival techniques from cultures around the world that you can actually use today. These aren't complicated. They don't require special equipment, but they work, and they've been proven over thousands of years. Let's face some uncomfortable truths. Natural disasters are increasing in both frequency and intensity. According to recent data, we've seen a 35% rise in climate-related emergencies over the past decade alone. But it's not just natural disasters we need to worry about. Getting lost while hiking happens to thousands of people every year. Vehicle breakdowns in remote areas, unexpected weather changes, power grid failures that can last for days or even weeks. The average person today wouldn't last 72 hours in a true survival situation. Why? Because we've outsourced our survival to systems and technologies that can fail us when we need them most. Think about your daily life. How many survival skills do you actually possess? Could you find and purify water without a filter or chemicals? Create fire without matches or a lighter? Identify which wild plants are safe to eat? Build a shelter that can protect you from the elements? Our ancestors could do all of this and more. The Bushmen of the Kalahari Desert can find water in one of the driest places on Earth. The Inuit can build shelters from snow that maintain temperatures of 40 degrees Fahrenheit, while it's -40 outside. Modern survival often focuses on having the right gear, but indigenous survival skills focus on having the right knowledge. Knowledge that doesn't weigh anything, never runs out of battery, and can't be lost or stolen. The problem isn't just that we lack these skills, it's that we don't even realize how vulnerable this makes us until it's too late. Let's start with perhaps the most fundamental tribal survival skill, making fire without modern tools. Fire-starting techniques developed by indigenous cultures work with materials found in nearly any environment. The hand drill method was used by tribes across North America and Africa. Here's how it works. First, find a softwood base and create a small depression. Gather tinder, the driest, finest plant material you can find. Create a spindle from a straight, dry hardwood stick. Place the spindle in the depression and roll it rapidly between your palms. As friction creates an ember, transfer it to your tinder bundle. Gently blow on the ember until it ignites the tinder. This takes practice, but Native American tribes taught children as young as 6 to master this skill. The bow drill method, used by tribes in colder regions, makes this process easier by using a bow to spin the drill. What makes these fire-starting techniques so valuable is that they work in almost any condition. The Coast Miwok tribe used controlled burns, not just for warmth and cooking, but for land management, actually improving soil quality and promoting plant growth. Remember, in a survival situation, fire gives you warmth, protection from predators, the ability to purify water, cook food, and signal for help. Master this skill, and you've already dramatically increased your chances of survival. Water is even more critical than fire. You can survive weeks without food, but only days without water. Indigenous cultures developed remarkable natural water purification methods that we can still use today. The Anasazi of the American Southwest survived in desert regions by creating solar stills to extract water from seemingly dry ground, harvesting water from certain plants, reading the landscape to find hidden springs. Here's how to build a solar still like indigenous desert dwellers. Dig a hole in a sunny spot. Place a container in the center. Cover the hole with plastic, securing the edges with rocks. Place a small stone in the center to create a depression. As the sun heats the ground, water vapor rises, condenses on the plastic, and drips into your container. But what about purification? Tribes across North America used these natural water purification techniques, filtering water through layers of sand, charcoal, and grass, boiling water with heated rocks when containers weren't available, using certain plants with natural antimicrobial properties. The Lakota would use the inner bark of white pine trees, which contains compounds that can help kill harmful bacteria. This knowledge of relationship-based foraging meant they understood not just what plants were useful, but why and how they worked. These methods aren't just historical curiosities. They're practical skills that can save your life when modern purification methods aren't available. Exposure to the elements can kill you faster than thirst or hunger in many environments. Primitive shelter-building techniques from indigenous cultures are remarkably effective and can be constructed with minimal tools. The Wampanoag tribe of New England constructed wetas, dome-shaped shelters made from saplings, bark, and cattail mats. These shelters featured a central fire with a smoke hole and could withstand harsh winter conditions. Let's look at how to build a simple lean-to shelter, a technique used by tribes worldwide. Find a fallen tree or sturdy branch as your ridgepole. Lean smaller branches against it at a 45-degree angle. Layer vegetation like ferns, palm leaves, or pine boughs from bottom to top. Add a thick layer of insulation inside if it's cold. Build a reflector wall opposite your fire to direct heat into the shelter. The key principle in primitive shelter building is working with, not against, the environment. Aboriginal dome-shaped huts used materials specific to their climate, creating designs perfectly adapted to local conditions. In cold environments, the Dakota fire hole, a specialized fire pit design, allowed indigenous peoples to maintain warmth while minimizing the visible signature of their fire, keeping them safe from predators and enemies. These shelters might seem simple, but they incorporate sophisticated design principles developed over thousands of years of trial and error, principles that work just as well today as they did centuries ago. Hunger becomes a serious concern in any extended survival situation. Knowledge of wild edible plants was essential for tribal communities, who often identified hundreds of useful species in their territories. Here are some universal edible plant families that indigenous peoples relied on. Amaranth. Found worldwide, the leaves are rich in nutrients. Cattails. Every part is edible at different seasons. Pine. The inner bark and pine nuts are calorie-rich survival foods. Dandelion. Entirely edible and found across most continents. The Lakota tradition of foraging wasn't just about taking from nature. It involved a relationship of respect and sustainability. They practiced seasonal rotation, never harvesting all plants from one area, ensuring continued growth for future needs. When uncertain about a plant, indigenous peoples used variations of what we now call the universal edibility test. Separate the plant into parts: leaves, stems, roots. Smell the plant for strong or unpleasant odors. Test for contact reactions by touching to the lip. If no reaction, taste a small portion without swallowing. If no reaction after 15 minutes, swallow a small amount. Wait 8 hours before eating more. This methodical approach to identifying wild edible plants helped tribes survive even when moving through unfamiliar territories. Remember, this knowledge varies by region, so learning the specific plants in your area is crucial. Let me tell you about Marcus, an experienced hiker who found himself in a life or death situation in the mountains of Colorado last year. What started as a day hike turned deadly when an unexpected snowstorm hit. Marcus slipped down a ravine, losing his backpack containing his phone, food, and emergency gear. With a sprained ankle, dropping temperatures, and the sun setting, he faced a potentially fatal night in the wilderness. But Marcus had studied tribal survival skills as a hobby. As panic threatened to set in, he remembered the wisdom of the indigenous peoples who had thrived in these same mountains for thousands of years. First, he needed shelter. Using the primitive shelter-building techniques of the Ute tribe, he quickly constructed a debris hut, piling pine boughs for insulation. This simple structure, developed over centuries of tribal knowledge, would keep him alive through the freezing night. Next came fire. With no matches or lighter, Marcus employed a bow drill method used by Native American tribes. After 20 minutes of effort, he had a small flame, the difference between hypothermia and survival. For water, he collected snow, but knew drinking it cold would lower his core temperature. Using heated rocks, a technique used by tribes who lacked metal containers, he melted and warmed the water safely. When morning came, Marcus used traditional navigation techniques, observing the sun's position and natural landmarks, to find his way back to the trail where he was eventually rescued. The doctor who treated him later said, "Without those shelter and fire skills, we would have been recovering a body, not treating a patient." This isn't just one story. Every year, people survive against the odds by applying these ancient tribal techniques. These aren't primitive skills. They're timeless skills that have never stopped being relevant. The most powerful survival tool isn't in your bug-out bag. It's between your ears. The knowledge that indigenous cultures developed and refined over thousands of years remains just as effective today as it was centuries ago. We've covered some of the most essential tribal survival skills today. Fire-starting techniques that work without modern tools, natural water purification methods that can make even questionable water safe, primitive shelter-building approaches that protect from the elements, wild edible plant identification to sustain you when food is scarce. But these are just the beginning. Indigenous peoples developed sophisticated systems for reading weather patterns, navigating without instruments, creating tools from natural materials, treating injuries and illness with medicinal plants, preserving food without refrigeration. What makes these ancient survival techniques so valuable isn't just their effectiveness, it's their reliability. They don't depend on technology. They don't require special equipment. They work with what's available in nature. In our modern world, we've gained convenience, but lost connection. Connection to the natural world and to the knowledge that sustained our species for millennia. Reconnecting with these tribal survival skills isn't just practical preparation, it's reclaiming our human heritage. These skills represent the height of human adaptation and ingenuity. They're not primitive, they're timeless. If this video has sparked your interest in ancient tribal techniques, you're already taking the first step toward true self-reliance. But knowledge without practice is just information, not skill. I challenge you to try at least one of these techniques this week. Start with something simple, like identifying 3 edible plants in your area or practicing a friction fire method. Leave a comment below, sharing which tribal survival skill you find most fascinating or which one you plan to practice first. Your insights might help another viewer on their journey.